Greetings. I wanted to take a brief moment to welcome all of the new subscribers to the channel and also give an update for those of you who've been eagerly awaiting part 2 of the Petrified Titans and Organs video, in which I'll be presenting my theories regarding the how and why of the findings I've shared in my previous videos. This week, I had the wonderful opportunity to be interviewed by Sean from Sgtreport. The response to that video was overwhelmingly positive, and thousands of new subscribers have found their way to the channel as a result. I'd like to welcome you all and send a big heartfelt thanks and shout out to Sean from Sgtreport for being courageous enough to cover such wild, unusual material on his channel. For those of you who found this channel as a result of that interview, the video that follows is a mirror of that interview. But if you're eager to know more and have not had the chance to see the Unveiling a Titan series or the videos on petrified organs, I encourage you to check those out, as the upcoming video will be far more meaningful if you're already familiar with the material. I received a wave of fantastic comments as a result of the interview. Some of them introduced me to exciting new information which directly related to the subject of the next video. I felt it important to include that new information, and unfortunately, that will take additional time. For those of you who are already subscribers and patiently awaiting part 2, I apologize for the delay and hope you'll enjoy this interview with Sean in the meantime. Finally, I'd like to send big thank yous to those few of you who've donated to the channel and let you know that I'll be earmarking those funds for future testing on the heart stones. So, without further ado, here's the interview with Sean from Sgtreport. I think the ancients knew a lot more about where we are than we do now because we've been lied to so much. This is trabecular bone. This is what bone looks like, inside where the blood is being produced. There are a ton of rocks that look just like this all over the plateau, and they're filled with red earth and iron ore. And I believe that that's the blood, and the iron ore would be the hardened version of the blood. This rock here is really fascinating because it's missing a chunk, you can see down here, and it's actually exposed some of these channels, and out of those channels is oozing this reddish earth that's iron rich. So the blood, the red blood is containing hemoglobin, and the hemoglobin has iron in it. So here's more example of what I believe is trabecular bone. If there's any truth to what I've discovered and what I'm presenting, then it shakes the foundations of a number of ologies. And we're going to have to go back and review them all and revisit things and try and test all things. I think the Bible says that, right?
Hey friends, Sean from Sgtreport here. I hope that opening soundbite piqued your curiosity, and if it did, I think you're really going to enjoy this discussion. All right friends, let's begin. Thank you so very much for tuning in. Something strange is happening. This will be an exploration of deep woo-woo. So, if you're not on board for that type of wild ride, I fully understand, but please stop the video now. There's no need to leave nasty, anti-productive comments, as I have now fairly warned you. Deep woo-woo is dead ahead. This is a conversation about hidden history and much, much more. Let's just say it's a giant topic. My guest today is the founder of the STELLIUM7 YouTube channel, and given the hidden history of the world, the mud floods, the Smithsonian being charged with swooping in and taking away the bones of giants every time they're found all over the world, and the footprints in megalithic blocks of stone of giants, one wonders, what are they actually hiding? Mike's Unveiling a Titan series is, if not fully insane, certainly food for thought. I'm kidding, Mike. We know you're not insane. How are you, sir? Welcome.
Very good. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to the show. It's an honor and a surprise to be here because I know this is a departure from the kinds of things you normally cover on your channel. So,
well, thanks for coming on. Perhaps it's a bit serendipitous that I discovered your videos. My mind was opened again after speaking with my friend Marty Leeds, and then that very evening while I was looking for things to post on my site, thephaser.com, I stumbled upon your series Unveiling a Titan, and I think it's interesting. I don't necessarily endorse your views or any views on this subject, but I do have an open mind, and I know the powers that be have been lying to us about the very nature of this world and its history. In fact, as I said at the beginning of the interview, something very strange is happening. People are starting to investigate the uninvestigatable. People are starting to ask questions. So, as we get into this, why don't you tell people a little bit about your background? Because you're using the scientific method. You're not a quack.
Yeah, I'm actually a chiropractor by trade, I went to university before that in California. So I've got a lot of college studies under my belt. So, yeah.
Well, and I think you
But
take a very measured approach in your videos, and you cite evidence that you believe points to the fact that giants did once roam this earth. And given that thesis, I would like to just read this verse from the Bible, 1 Chronicles 20, verse 6. Again, there was war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature, who had 24 fingers and toes, 6 fingers on each hand, and 6 toes on each foot, and he also was descended from the giants. All right, so with that out of the way, where would you like to begin? Because your Unveiling a Titan series is deep, deep woo-woo, because that is a big, big story. That one might be really tough for people to swallow. I found your research, and we can talk about that, but I found your research on the stones, the heart stones, to be quite compelling.
Mhm.
So why don't you start there? And the first question I have about that is, how on earth, well, I'll let you start there, and then I'll jump in with my question, because I have one important question about those stones that you believe are not just stones.
Right. Well, a long time ago, or not that long ago, a couple years ago, I got exposed to the idea of rapid petrification, mud fossils, a lot of people are calling them. The idea that the amount of time that's necessary for something to turn to a fossil doesn't take millions of years, but it can actually happen in very short periods of time. So that was an interesting idea. And then also the idea that a lot of the different stones that we see around the world are actually biological in origin, and that we're actually seeing biogeology, not just geology. So that was an interesting idea for me, and it led me to other things as well. I was actually thinking we were going to be speaking more about the mountain. So,
And we can get to that, absolutely.
yeah.
We can go there and talk about Unveiling a Titan specifically, but feel free to do a screen share, by the way, on your end. So you can show us anything you want, take us through anything you want. I just thought that was compelling because of your scientific approach to what you were finding inside the stones, the particles in the passageways that do correspond biologically with a heart. So the one question I had about that for you, though, is where would the rest of the bones be? Where would the rest of the body be? How are we just finding these stones that have ventricles and things that look like hearts? How did these hearts of giants end up out there by themselves?
Yeah, you went straight to the question that I'm going to be answering, or attempting to answer, in the next video that I'm working on right now. I believe that ultimately that if it's not something biblical, it's interesting that you started with the Bible there. I'm not a Christian, and I didn't come at this from a creationism standpoint at all.
You'll get there, my friend. You'll get there. I promise you.
I was just curious.
You will get there. Just read the first book of Genesis and then compare and contrast that to the New World Order story that we were all given as kids going through public schools, that it all happened by way of a big bang. We're just an accident. Nothing could be further.
So from a biblical perspective, you've got obviously something like the glittering sword. You've got, some people are talking about plasma apocalypses in the flat Earth community. I'd like to keep it more to mainstream geology and potential explanations that could be found in science, and so.
Which is actually good, by the way, because now I've just played my cards as a Christian. You know that my worldview is maybe not the same worldview you have, and yet here we have come together to have a conversation, which, because of the way you present your information in your videos on the YouTube channel STELLIUM7, you use the scientific approach, so you're not a crackpot, and your approach to the Unveiling a Titan series, I thought was quite compelling, and that's why we're having this conversation, even though your worldview and my worldview spiritually are maybe very different.
Yeah. my mind is open to a lot of different possibilities now, obviously, as you know from my work. The thing that I've been looking at to answer your question about how it would just be hearts is there are things called lahars. We know of other things called pyroclastic flows. These are ejections from volcanoes that can be superheated ash that can be mixed with liquid. There's a lot of things that could potentially explain what I'm finding. The real question I had as I started to find these rocks, because it was clear to me what I was finding. You know, I'll just show you some of the examples of them. I mean, to a skeptic, they're going to look at it and think I've picked out a bunch of rocks that have a similar form, but I've gone through in a number of different videos. This one is, you know, covering what you were touching on before, the idea of the giant's hearts. But it started with this, because I found this rock in a river bottom, and this was after coming across the idea of mud fossils and rapid petrification, and I recognized the anatomical features right away. And I brought the rock home and I started looking through the anatomy books, and I eventually got an endoscopic camera to look inside. And you can see the list on the right there. It's 15 different, very, very specific anatomical correlations in that one rock. And that list has grown to 20 now. So it was utterly mind-blowing, because we're taught that that can't happen. You know, the soft tissue doesn't petrify like that or fossilize. You know, we'll find skeletons, but the soft tissue is long eaten away by the worms and the microbes and whatnot. But mud fossil theory is interesting, because things are buried in mud, which is an anaerobic environment. So the things that would normally eat away at the flesh can't thrive without oxygen. That's what anaerobic means. So that was interesting, but it still didn't explain why I wasn't finding the rest of the bodies. Why just organs? And it's not just hearts. I get that question a lot. People ask, you know, why are you just finding hearts? What about the other organs? And, you know, the other organs are there as well. They're just far less distinct. I mean, if you think about something like a kidney, if I hold up a rock that looks like a kidney and I say it's a kidney, people are going to think I'm crazy, right? And the same goes with things like spleens, and livers are not so distinct, but hearts are very distinct in their anatomy. And so I went out looking for more and more of these, and I started finding them all over the place. And but it still didn't answer the question that you asked, is why am I finding organs and why not the rest of the body? Now, it may be that some of the fragmented rocks that I'm finding in the river bottoms and the valleys, that those are actually you know, pieces of these other parts of the body. But I think what's happening ultimately is that when the destructive force, whatever it is, sweeps through, that it's ultimately burning up the outer portions of the body. And because the organs themselves are contained within the chest and the abdominal cavities, they're hanging, they're floating in liquid. So I think what's happening is the outer portions of the body are being burned away with these incredible, you know, amounts of heat and pressure. If you think of a crock pot, you know, if you put bones into a crock pot, within a few hours, they soften and they turn to sponge, and eventually, you know, this is how people make bone broth. Now, if you imagine...
Maybe for the squeamish, my friend, maybe we can take this image off now.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah,
anyway,
for the squeamish out there, we'll just get rid of that image. You get the idea. One of the things I did want to ask you, though, and I don't mean to interrupt, you can continue on that thought pattern, but when I was first watching your videos about these stones, hearts, whatever they may be, I didn't necessarily make the leap that they were giants, the hearts of giants in human form. Perhaps they're the remains of giant creatures, which of course ties into a Titan series. So I'm not exactly sure, because in your diagram you showed a human form when you're discussing the kidney and the heart. So that made me think, well, maybe you believe these are the remains of giants in human form, or perhaps other creatures.
Yeah, I think all of the above. They're in all kinds of different sizes. I find them down to this size, and I find them. This one is in my office. That's 1.5 feet in length. These are contiguous rocks, which means they're unbroken. They're not pieces of larger structures that have broken off and then rolled around in river bottoms. As soon as a rock is fractured, you can immediately see it. Like if you see this one here, there's a fracture there that's actually exposing the ventricle in that rock.
Well, so let's talk about the ventricles, because for those who are logging off right now saying this guy's nuts, there's no way, this is impossible, because people do that. And 5% of the people are clearly going to do that, maybe 10%. And that's the nature of woo-woo. It doesn't matter if we're talking about UFOs or the spiritual warfare that might suggest that UFOs are demonic. I mean, nobody agrees on everything in this world. So talk about it from a scientific perspective, what you found, the ventricles, the things that biologically suggest that you're on the right track here.
So if you look at this rock, there's a curve here. Can you see the mouse as I'm moving it around?
Yes.
Okay. So these curves, if you understand how the heart works, when a creature dies and the energy is no longer available to keep the heart pumping, then the heart actually goes into contraction. So the energy is needed to relax the heart. So, think rigor mortis and everything hardens in the body. Then when that contraction happens, then the heart will it will curve on the sides like this. In the mud fossils, the Heart of the Matter videos, I show that with video, and I 3D modeling and everything to help people see exactly what's happening and where things are located and how that compares to the rock that you're looking at here. I know it sounds absurd, because going back to the idea of the anaerobic environment, and even if you're talking about mud fossils, you're talking about something that's happening over at least months or a year or several years. We're not talking about millions of years like the mainstream geological narrative. We're talking about shorter periods of time. But what I believe is happening with these organs, and the reason I've steered away from the mud fossil term, is that I think that they've actually been petrified. So that squeamish picture that I was showing before, if you think of the outer portion of the body being burned away, then the organs are there floating in their own sacs, which are known as fascia. So it's like this fatty layer that's surrounding and protecting the organ. And the heat is going to be basically boiling all of the fluid inside. So if you think of the bones are going to be like, bones in a crock pot, melting down to nothing. Meanwhile, while that's happening, the organs are going to basically solidify and harden like hard-boiled eggs. That's my theory. That's what I'm working on right now, and I'll be presenting that in more detail and offering some of the different scientific evidence that's in support of that in my next video, which I'm working on now.
Well, we look forward to that, and I'll try to link your channel below in the more info section. The other thing, as we wrap up on this particular part of the conversation, that I thought was interesting is when you have split some of these open. Do you have any images of that? The color.
I don't actually. I didn't prepare any images, but in the video "Broken Hearts Tell Tales," because a lot of people wanted to know what was inside. I'm just one guy. I don't have access to a laboratory. I'm out of pocket on this one. It's not something that I'm earning any money from. So I don't have access to an MRI machine or a CAT scan, which would really give me a visual in 3D of the internal structures of the rocks, that would be the next level to go to with it. Meanwhile, people have been saying, get yourself like a mud saw where you can just slice right through these rocks. And unfortunately, I live in an apartment, and my office is an apartment as well, so I don't have access to a saw and a place where I can do that, and I don't want to destroy or slice into them before I've had a chance to actually have them scanned and with 3D imaging. So in the meantime, I went down live to the river bottoms where I found a lot of these, and found other ones that match the criteria that I list in the first couple of videos I did on this topic, and I start crushing them live. And you can see that these rocks that are white on the outside, on the inside, they have reddish, iron-rich tissue, blood, if you will. The remains of chambers are inside, and so that's if someone wants to see what they look like on the inside, that's the place to go. If you look at this one, this is one that I've broken open. You can see how red it is on the inside. And then oftentimes when they're opened up, there will be chambers inside as well.
All right, I'll try to splice some of that in.
I just want to make something clear. Sorry to go for more squeamish, But this is an elephant heart. This is a giraffe heart. Massive differences, in size and in shape. This is a pig's heart. So there are very, very big variations when it comes to different heart types, and then also the phase of contraction at the time of death, and whether or not the heart has been compressed under great pressure with, if you're thinking of mud flood, or lahars, which are basically, think of a volcanic flow that's like a massive avalanche. In fact, I can show some pictures of what that looks like here. One second.
And remind me, as we move on here in a second to unveiling a Titan, what is the name of that mountainous feature is it Spain?
Yes, the name of the mountain is Mont Go.
Okay.
And this is a picture of Mount St. Helens, and all of this is pyroclastic flow. Mm-hmm. That's ash mixed with water flowing, and this is what Mount St. Helens looked like from above. So I think, it's pretty clear that can lead to things like this. So we're taught that these were carved directly out of stone, but this is a more modern version of that. So obviously volcanic rock is much softer than granite or marble or the different things that these ancient buildings might have been made out of. And there's plenty of evidence of volcanic flow. This is very close to the mountain. You can see all these different layerings. Here's volcanic. Here's this looks like mud, but this reddish here is actually stone. You have to go up to here before you get earth and rock that you can just brush away with your hands, but this is actually solidified. So you can see all these different layers that are at work, and this is also right next to the mountain. So this is volcanic flow that's coming all the way down to right by the mountain, and this is a cave called Cova Tallada that they've gone into and cut massive amounts of rock out of these caves to build buildings in the area. And here's another example of how the volcanic flow has come over the bedrock, this is the limestone of which Mont Go is made of. So there's a lot of evidence in this area to support the idea that perhaps this was a Titan, and that there was a cataclysm that destroyed it.
All right, so I'll take a deep breath here, because this is, to me, even deeper woo-woo than the Heartstones. All right, let's talk about, in the 40 minutes that we have left together here, and I know that's probably not enough time, so if people want, leave a comment below if you think this is interesting enough to go deeper. We can have another conversation sometime with STELLIUM7. You're unveiling a Titan series. Do you want to show the image of that formation? There it is. Okay.
Yeah, so this is Mont Go, and it's known affectionately in the region as the elephant, because it looks a lot like an elephant. You can see the head, and you can see the cave here, which is a massive cave that we'll go into in a little more detail. But it's an absolutely beautiful mountain, and something just popped up. Oh, there we go. Okay. This is the other side of it. Doesn't look quite as much like an elephant from this side, but this portion of the mountain has all collapsed, and I talk about that in detail in the videos. This is a closer look of the eye from below, and that's quite fascinating, because it's not only exactly where it should be anatomically, but well, wait, just for the skeptics in the audience, I just want to first show them this. So this is a list of all of the coincidences that I've compiled with regards to the mountain. And
can I say something before you get to those? Let's just level set,
yeah,
because I want people to understand what you're suggesting. And people are probably going to think I'm nuts for having you on, because what you're suggesting is that formation, that mountainous formation,
that's what I'm suggesting,
may be a biological entity of giant proportions that was
Titanic
fossilized?
Proportions.
Of Titanic proportions. So, yeah, better said.
So, if you're thinking of the Bible, there's an extra biblical text known as the Book of Enoch that describes the Titans, and there was a great war, and it actually gives measurements for the Titans as well. And I think it's 300 or 3,000 ells, and that equates to roughly a mile in altitude. This mountain is roughly 2,500 feet tall, and it's about 3.5 miles long. And So this is an example
Now, of course,
of
the
it's
tusks are
Photoshop,
photoshopped in, yeah.
but it has to be, right?
Right, just
Because
to
there
give
are.
the suggestion of what might have been. Okay, now let's get back to those coincidences, though, because for those who are
Okay.
still with us, your coincidences in your scientific approach to the research is eye-opening.
Yeah. So you know, when I first got on this topic, it came after first seeing a few videos that were just really undermining some of the cornerstones of geology and what we know about dating and the age of things and how things are formed. I mean, you know, stuff like this, the no trees on Earth. You know, the idea that maybe these plateaus were actually once giant tree stumps. Now, there's some people who say that these aren't tree stumps at all. You know, if you think of Devil's Tower, um, there's some who are theorizing that this is a giant tendon. I have a hard time buying that one myself, but you know, the idea that a lot of these structures are actually tendons. But there's a lot of examples in the fossil record that don't really match what we know about you know, what they say. I mean, when you look at the age of things, this is, you know, what they tell us, and they're talking in timelines of hundreds of millions of years, and you know, they use these layers of strata to justify their timelines. But then you've got things like this, where you've got trees, you know, tree trunks that are extending through multiple layers of strata. So I'm sure they've got some clever explanation for how that is, but it's just one of those things that makes you go, you know, and those geological timelines are also their, you know, their
There's
their justification for the Big Bang and
the
and everything
all-time
that's come
lie,
since.
the Big Bang. See, and my
Right.
point here about spirituality is, you just carry this with you beyond this conversation and give it some thought. They tell us that we are the result of a Big Bang, right? They can't prove the Big Bang. So to me, believing in the Big Bang is as big a leap of faith as believing in the book of Genesis, which says God spoke it into being. So take for that what you will, and we'll get back to these coincidences.
That's the second half of the coincidence list. I showed the first half already. So in the 2 years that I've been at this now, I've compiled over 50 different specific anatomical correlations between, I'm not attached to the idea that it's an elephant. I mean, it could be some other creature that, you know, but I am pretty confident that it's a vertebrate, you know, and the eye alone has close to 20 different specific correlations, and those are listed here.
And you've
So
explored it, just so people understand. You've been in it. You've explored it,
yeah,
correct? All right.
yeah, and I've documented every one of the things on those lists that I've shown. I've documented with photographic and video evidence, and I've gone in, you know, with video cameras and been deep inside the cave of the eye. And then there are actual channels that go even further back that correspond to other parts of the anatomy. So I just want to let people know I'm well aware of the concept of pareidolia, and, you know, seeing things that aren't actually there, or recognizing patterns that don't exist. And I don't believe that's what's happening, and that's why I've tried to approach it as scientifically as I could. And in fact, when I started to get onto this idea, and I thought, this is just utterly crazy, you know, I didn't want to look like a fool and start making claims. And so I decided I was going to revisit the eye, which I had hiked to on many occasions, and go up there and document what I was finding. But first I wanted to look through all of the anatomy books and look at 3D anatomy, and just, you know, have a list of things that I was expecting to find when I went up there, rather than going up and finding a bunch of things and just trying to fit them into my crazy theory. And so when I did that the second video I did on the Unveiling a Titan series is entirely about the eye. Somebody just today introduced me to a new term that I had never heard of before. It's called apophenia, and that's the tendency to mistakenly perceive connections and meaning between unrelated things. So they were claiming that that's what I was doing with the heart stones, and other people have made many claims that I'm suffering from pareidolia.
Well, Stellium, if it makes you feel any better, that's the same exact thing the Mockingbird mainstream media says about those that believe in quote-unquote conspiracy theories, especially conspiracy theories surrounding the events of 9/11. We're told that we extrapolate things that don't exist and make connections that don't exist in and concoct these conspiracy theories because they say it makes us feel better about random, horrible events. It makes us feel better to think that they're the result of deep-rooted conspiracies as opposed to what we're told, which is just sometimes bad people do bad things. And, 18 or 19 guys with box cutters took 3 planes and defeated the Pentagon's surveillance systems and NORAD's security surveillance systems, and World Trade Center 7 came down at free fall speed.
Now there's some
because of those
mythology
19
for you,
guys.
huh?
But yeah, and that my point here
Yeah,
is that the Mockingbird mainstream media maligns anyone who thinks outside of the official narratives that are shoved down our throats.
And when you bring up the topic of conspiracies, I mean, it's an incredibly dark subject that leads to all kinds of really depressing places. And, and a lot of people, once they get on it, they start to freak out, and they, it's like, are you going to become a prepper and run to the hills of Montana and start collecting guns, or, what are you going to do with it? And I got exposed to this stuff, from the time I was in my late teens, early 20s. My dad turned me on to William Cooper, and that was an eye opener way back then. But if you keep going with it, eventually, going down all these different rabbit holes, eventually you find some things that are really kind of a breath of fresh air. I call them prospiracies instead of conspiracies. They're the different little things that you discover that like remove fear and make you feel better about life. And I mean, once you realize NASA is completely full of it, then the fear porn of an asteroid strike, the teeth are taken out of the dragon, so to speak. And
thank you.
I remember when I was a kid, we used to, hide under the desks, for the drills, in case there was a nuclear strike, and they told us all kinds of things about nuclear winters, and nothing would grow for thousands of years. And, I saw a documentary on Chernobyl, and that's a thriving ecosystem over there, and the animals are, loving it. And, people were moving into Nagasaki and Hiroshima shortly after the bombs went off. So I don't know how that matches with nuclear winters, but so, eventually you come across some of the fun ideas, like I showed you the avatar tree stumps, and things like Tartaria and star forts, and, maybe Atlantis really existed, and that kind of stuff. And so I think ultimately that our past was far more far out than we were led to believe, and that, ultimately the truth is beyond the beyond. And the stuff that I've discovered over the last couple of years has only confirmed that. And it wasn't what I set out to do. I was just curious, but I started to look at the mountain more. This is the viscera. The organs would all flatten out if it was lying on its stomach. I saw this picture in another video that just that was one of the things that got me going. Wait a minute. What about Mont Go? Is it possible in this one as well? So.
Go back to that last one. That is really something. That does look exactly like an elephant. Yeah, and the previous one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost looks like the skin, and here you can see the trunk extending to the left. I've got a picture of Mont Go, and you'll see it. Let's see here.
Well, just so people understand, just to couch this conversation, again, something strange is happening. People are starting to explore the previously uninvestigatable things, and certainly that's this area. But more recently, all the research being done about mud floods, people are discovering this recent history that we're not told about, right? These mud floods where now cities have been built upon cities, and nobody knew that. Case in point, one photo that's become very popular now of a place, I believe it's in Paris. But the point is that they've completely lied to us about our history. So I think given that truth, all areas of investigation should be open, and you've certainly tapped into something interesting here. I don't know.
It's a set of lies agreed upon, right?
Well, that's right. Even our current history, 9/11, case in point. What will they teach kids? Well, their version of what they want kids to know. So, have you found any other? I'm sorry to interrupt, but have you found any other examples that remind you? Well, no, go ahead. I interrupted. You just go ahead.
Oh, you were thinking of other examples of potential titans, or?
Yeah. Have you found any?
There's loads of photographs out there of people, lots of different faces and lots of different structures. But the problem with those is they're all taken from like a single angle, and the lighting is just right, and and it's like it could possibly be what they're claiming it is, but it could also be pareidolia, looking up at a cloud and seeing some animal in the cloud or something. It doesn't mean there's an animal up there. So the only way to really know for sure is to do something like what I've done with this mountain, where you're on the ground and you start to really examine things, look at the structures, compare them to anatomy, go inside if you can, that sort of thing. And so I caution people against making outlandish claims without any evidence or proof. And yeah, so I was on about something before. Oh, well, the picture in front of you right here. This is Mammoth, and you talk about mud flood. There's a mud flood for you, but that's no longer mud. What's below the elephant is stone, but the elephant itself has turned to limestone, which is very interesting, because what do they tell us about limestone? Limestone is sedimentary rock composed mainly of skeletal fragments of marine organisms, coral forms, and mollusks. So bone, essentially, right? So limestone, they're telling us that things have died and they've been compressed under the ocean floor for many, 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 many millions of years. And then eventually they're pushed up by tectonic activity, and then those rocks break off into smaller and smaller pieces, and then they get eroded by the rain and the wind, and then rolling around in the river bottoms, and then we get these kinds of stones that we've seen. Now the interesting thing about it is Montgo is made of limestone. And so this is a view from above, and you can really make out the head, and you can see what I believe was an ear attachment, and then the eye is over here. And you can see a better look here of you see this rock, how this is red, but everything else is gray. This is I believe what's known as spongeous bone. So think of the upper layer of this sandwich being removed and exposing this. This is a blood-rich layer. All of our bones are producing our blood. So here's another view of it. And this is what the mountain looks like on the very top. So there's lots of examples of this, what I believe is trabecular bone. I go into that a lot in the fourth video, which is all about the tissues of the mountain. If we go back and we just look at this skeleton, this skull of an elephant, you can see there's a little hole right here. Actually, we can go, where'd it go? It's not giving my menu. Forget it. I'll come back to it. Yeah, so this is the eye, and this is actually a big muscle known as the temporalis muscle. All vertebrates are more or less the same. Our morphology changes, and the shapes of the bones change a bit, but we have more or less the same skeletal structures, and there's massive variations from species to species as well. This is another example. So there's a cave right in Montgo. There's the big eye, and then there's another cave right there. Let me see if I can get back to that. There it is. Okay, so this is the mountain here. And interestingly enough, you can see in my first three videos that the mountain, since I did those videos, has been edited by Google. So before, see how the eye is closed? Watch this. You have to get in right up next to it to be able to see the eye.
Yeah, interesting.
So what I was doing before, basically the only part of the mountains that's been changed is right here. None of the other other part of the mountain or any of the other mountains in the area have been changed. So you can see like the ear is all covered up. So I have to get in right next to it. So you can't get the big picture and see the detail like I was able to the first year and a half that I was doing this.
I do think what's interesting about the Mount Go there, these images, is the striations, I guess, is that what you'd call them? Here's the tricky part about this conversation. It's so deep woo-woo that people are going to dismiss it out of hand, because if this was a Titan, Where are the other Titans? There should be mountains all over the earth, or certainly all over Spain, that represent this. How did this one creature fall there and perish and become this?
There are plenty of candidates
Yeah.
all over the world, and there's several in this region. I mean, if I just look at this mountain over here, where is it? There it is. You know, there's another potential candidate right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are mountains that look like dragons, and you know, I mean, maybe it may be pareidolia, but there's a whole lot of things. Like if you look at this here, this would be the spine, the back. The head is turned to the right. Right where the head would end, there's a curve right here, which is right where the head would end, and then the neck would be, and the shoulder would begin. And right on this side, you've got the same curve right in the same location. And there's the faint outline of ribs. You can see them here, the rib cage on both sides. From the front, a lot of people have said, well, where's the other eye if it's, you know, if it's a creature? And the interesting thing is that mainstream geology tells us that this section of the mountain, there's a curve here, and that this whole section of the mountain has collapsed. And I've hiked all in here. This whole area is just a river of, it's not only limestone, but hold on one second. Let me find it. You know, it's bone that looks like this, and this is, I mean, sorry, it's rock that looks like that. This is known as trabecular bone, and this is where the blood is produced. And when you get into this is what I cover in the 4th video. The histology, like here's a section, a big chunk of rock that's missing, and it's reddish underneath. And I believe that this is trabecular bone. This is what bone looks like, you know, inside where the blood is being produced. There are a ton of rocks that look just like this all over the plateau, and they're filled with red earth and iron ore. And I believe that that's the blood, and the iron ore would be the hardened version of the blood. And, you know, that there you can really see it. So that would be maybe perhaps like coagulated blood. And it's filled with all these channels that are going all over the place. And in fact, this rock here is really fascinating because it's missing a chunk. You can see down here, and it's actually exposed some of these channels, and out of those channels is oozing this reddish earth that's iron rich. So the blood, you know, the red blood is containing hemoglobin, and the hemoglobin has iron in it. So here's more example of what I believe is trabecular bone. Incidence list that I've put up there in the beginning. I find
it really fascinating. Tell people, what is your channel name and how do they find it again? STELLIUM7, right?
It's STELLIUM7, yeah, and STELLIUM. Yeah, and there are 2 playlists on there. One is called the Unveiling a Titan playlist, and the other has to do with the petrified organs and the hearts as well. The people who've criticized the work, I mean, the critics, most of them will probably just dismiss it, you know, with hand waves and not even give it the time of the day. The ones who have criticized it and actually left comments, when I dig deeper, I find out they haven't even bothered to watch the videos, and they never come with any kinds of specific criticisms for any of the stuff that I presented. So, you know, take that for what it is. The funny thing is that even some of the there's been a couple of prominent flat earthers that refuse to watch the videos, and I thought, wow, I've really accomplished something if I've come up with ideas that are so crazy that even flat earthers won't consider them.
That's funny. Yeah, that's pretty funny. I'm going to take heat, and David Weiss, for whatever reason, I don't know. Do you know David Weiss?
I do, yes.
Okay, you must have told him you were coming on, because he reached out to me and said, good on you for bringing him on, and you're going to take a lot of heat, though. And I said, well, why would I take
wonderful things about the channel?
Why would I take heat for having a conversation about woo-woo when we know they've lied to us about the very history of this thing we live on. I mean, they've lied to us at every step, and they've lied to us by design. And again, it comes back to me from a spiritual perspective. They don't want human beings to know that God is real and we were created in the image of a loving God. That's my take on this thing. Not specifically on Titans at all, believe me, but my take is that the powers that be, the pyramidal structure that controls this planet and has controlled the history as we know it or believe it to be true, they don't want people, human beings, to know God is real because then they can fearmonger to us endlessly about asteroids and, the end of the world is always at hand, and we need to trust them to protect us and give $53 million, what is it, a day to NASA? I don't know.
It's absurd.
It's absurd.
And they can't even show us a proper picture of the place we live.
No, they're not going to put a rover on the moon with an HD camera pointing back at this thing upon which we live. The question is, why not? Well, I think we're starting to understand why not. It surprises me that some of these flat earth people wouldn't give your videos the time of day.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, everything that I've done, if there's any truth to it, then it completely challenges the mainstream geological narratives. I mean, the people who are educated, they'll say that I'm suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect, that I know just enough about this stuff. I'm not trying to present myself as an expert. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a paleontologist. I'm a chiropractor. I've studied a lot of anatomy and physiology and histology, and so I was able to recognize these things. And I know how to go and look in books and look at 3D modeling and see is there actually any kind of a correlation. Ironically, the big challenges to a lot of the cornerstones of geology have come from the creationist side. So of course they're gonna just brush them off as pseudoscientific crackpots who are just attempting to support their religious beliefs. But if there's any truth to what I've discovered and what I'm presenting, then it shakes the foundations of a number of ologies, and we're going to have to go back and review them all and revisit things and try and test all things. I think the Bible says that, right? And find out what is true and what isn't. What have we been lied to about? What haven't we? And someone went into one of my comment threads and said, "What are you? Are you an archaeologist? Are you a biologist?" And jokingly, I just wrote, "I'm a titanologist." It's an ology that doesn't exist yet, but if it ever exists, then I suppose my PhD thesis has already been done. Yeah.
Well,
it's one of the fun things about the place where I live, the river that I found a lot of the heartstones in is known as the Gata de Gorgos River, which I think is ironic considering the Gorgon is the Medusa. The Perseus cuts off the head of Medusa in order to turn the Titan to stone.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and actually, in the video that I did called "Helical Hearts, Petrified Organs," that video, I talk about some really amazing stuff with regards to knowledge about the heart that isn't known on a widespread level. And in fact, not even within many cardiologists don't even know. I mean, we're taught that the heart is a pump that's pumping the blood out to all of the 60,000 miles of blood vessels that supposedly exist in the body, and then it passively fills on relaxation, and that model just has never really worked. And the guy who cracked the nut on that one is a Spanish medical doctor named Francisco Torrent Guasp, and he discovered that the heart is actually helical and it functions like a toroid, and he was able to dissect and unravel the heart, and it's basically one long band that contracts in a spiral that it's just utterly fascinating, and I talk about it in that video. But the amazing thing is that he lived and worked his whole life just 10 minutes from where I am here in Spain. So that was another amazing synchronicity.
Synchronicity is a good word.
And there's an ear also, and not just I was talking about the cutout of the ear. That was when it really started to get incredibly Twilight Zone. because I hypothesized that if there was an eye and there were a ton of different anatomical correlations with the eye, then maybe there was an ear. So I thought, well, I can maybe climb up there and see if I can find a cave or something. And as I started to look into the maps and which road to take and everything, I came across a website and found out that there was a cave there. And not only was there a cave there, but the cave, which I didn't know about before I went looking for it, happens to be the most thoroughly excavated cave in all of Europe. They've gone in there with a team of archaeologists. They've gone in with 3D mapping. They've done an excavation. There were body part, skeletons up there. There were cave paintings. And ironically, there's 3 different sections of the cave going in different directions, which I haven't actually been inside on my own, but they got better footage than I ever would have gotten on my own. And it is amazing how many correlations I was able to spot in the ear of Moltke. So,
interesting.
and then the 5th video, I revisit the eye and found, I'll save it as a surprise for the people who are interested in watch the series from beginning to end. If, like David Weiss said, first one, he was kind of shaking his head. Second one, he's like, wait a minute. By the 3rd one, he was a believer. And the 4th and 5th, he's just like, this is totally altering my reality.
Oh, that's funny. Well, do me a favor and end your screen share, will you? I want to be able to say a proper goodbye to you. So we'll get your image back up here full. There we go. Well, I can't say that I'm a quote-unquote believer, but I am an explorer, and I do like to take a look at information that challenges my predisposed beliefs and my predisposed belief in what we've been told our entire lives. I think that's how so many of us have been able to overcome the lies of, again, 9/11, right? They lie to us about everything. So who's to say that they're not lying to us about the very nature of this world upon which we live, this earth, this planet? In the history of this planet, what came before us? Were there titans? How much of the Bible is accurate? They talk about giants in the Bible endlessly, David versus Goliath. And again, where I started, I mentioned the Smithsonian, famously swooping in every time there are the skeletal remains of what are said to be giants are found across the globe. Who swoops in and grabs them and hides them away in a closet never to be seen again? The Smithsonian. So.
Yeah, there's so much photographic evidence for the existence of giants. It's just how they can deny it. I don't know. It's I like what Crow says. He said belief is the enemy of knowing, and yeah.
Well, I appreciate
test all things.
Yeah, test all things. That's right.
People don't realize that the worldwide religion right now that everyone exists under is the religion of scientism. And there's so much lousy science out there that's being passed off as fact, and that we're just supposed to lap it up. And it's you find that a lot of the foundations for what we're taught to believe are really houses of cards. And if you scratch the surface, they start to fall apart.
Yeah, and don't get me started about the science of vaccines.
Yeah, I heard in one of your interviews that you had a vaccine, two vaccine injured children, and my daughter was also injured by a vaccine, so that made me very skeptical to a lot of, what's coming out of the medical industry.
Yeah, so. Well, and as was famously shared on the High Wire with Del Bigtree several times now, is the fact that I think out of the 36 childhood vaccines, 2 have been tested, and out of the ingredients in those vaccines, 1 ingredient has been tested. The safety and efficacy of vaccines has not been tested, and the big pharma companies have blanket amnesty against lawsuits if they damage your child with their vaccines, but we're told to trust the science. So,
right.
All right, my friend, it was nice to meet you. I didn't know that we'd have enough time with only an hour. We've only gone about 48 minutes, not even. Yeah, around 48 minutes. So I guess what I would invite people to do, covered a lot of ground, and yeah, it's deep woo-woo, but I think it's interesting. Tell people how they can find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, the channel is STELLIUM7. I made a BitChute channel as well, same name. And the this Google censorship is in full swing. You know, the shadow banning, the downing of channels. I mean, we live in a modern day book burning. There's no doubt about it. And so I put something up on BitChute and got an Instagram account with the same name, which I don't really use very much. And yeah, there's more information in the liner notes of the videos if people want to reach me. I get a lot of people sending me pictures, and a lot of times it's hard to tell, and I encourage them to do, you know, something similar to what I've done. And you know, we need more people doing this kind of thing to amass a large amount of evidence that is undeniable.
Well, and I also think it makes hiking and exploring and you're doing your own archaeological expeditions in places like Mount Go quite a bit more interesting when you're, how do you pronounce it?
Mont Go.
Mont Go.
M-O-N-T, yeah.
It just makes it more interesting when you look at the world through different eyes. You know, open your eyes, open your mind.
I had someone tell me that my videos were more powerful than psychedelics because they don't wear off. I thought that was funny.
That is funny. All right, guys, our guest has been Mike from the STELLIUM7 YouTube channel. I appreciate your time.
Likewise. It's been a real pleasure. Nice to meet you, Sean.
Nice to meet you, sir. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you who stuck with us, thank you. Thanks for the open mind. Please leave constructive comments below. Negativity and just being rude doesn't help anybody. I mean, why would you even listen to a conversation like this if you didn't find it interesting? That was all we're trying to do here, guys, today is bring you something interesting. Hopefully you'll see the world through different eyes because, as we know, they've lied to us about damn near everything. Our guest has been STELLIUM7. Appreciate you guys all for tuning in. And I'll remind you, for real news 24/7, you can visit us directly at sgtreport.com, where my latest 3 videos are always sticky posted at the very top of the page. We love you guys. A special thanks to my patrons for keeping us in the fight for truth and real news. I guess I can't say this was real news, but it is interesting, and that's what we're here for. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. God bless. Bye-bye.
Here's where I stand. I don't care what stripe they are. Every one of them takes an oath to uphold the Constitution, and none of them adhere to the oath.